I was just eating just vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, and just meat. And just by dropping the spinach, kale, and broccoli, I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. And so, it was just came right off me. And I was eating more calories. I was eating much more meat. I started eating a lot more meat, a lot more fatty meat. So I probably quintupled my calories, but I lost 10 kilos. But I lost 10 kilos.
This man claims to have simply dropped spinach, kale, and broccoli from his diet, but then probably quintupled his calories and then lost 10 kilograms or 22 pounds. Just what? Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be starting a new series titled Worst of the Carnivores. I say kind of because I've already done a video on the carnivore doctor, Shawn Baker, which technically falls under the goals for this series, so I recently renamed it to fit the series. If it wasn't obvious, in this series we will be investigating various claims made by specific carnivore influencers, whether they have any merit, how they stand up to the scientific literature, and more. Today's episode will be on Anthony Chaffee, a very prominent figure in the carnivore movement. At the time that I'm filming this video, he has 165,000 YouTube subscribers and 154,000 followers on Instagram. According to his YouTube channel, he is an American medical doctor and neurosurgical resident. Let's now investigate some of the claims he's made. We'll start with this video titled, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, Plants Are Trying to Kill You. Now, before we get into the video, I will say that given we have no good reasons to think that plants are sentient, I find it hard to fathom how they could even possess intentional states. So when he says plants are trying to kill you, I'm very confused. But anyway, let's give this video a watch.
So let's take a think about this. Okay, so just botany 101, plants are living organisms and they like to stay living organisms. If you eat them, they die. And so they have defenses just like any other living organism. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they use a lot of different things, but poison is one of their main deterrents. They use these defense chemicals to poison the animals that are trying to eat them, and they have hundreds of different ones.
Now, this whole idea is very interesting because some plants, like fruits, spread by us consuming their seeds and spreading them about. So for some plants, being eaten is actually the way in which they spread their seed. Quite literally, which of course spreads the existence of their species. So even if you want to pretend like plants have a kind of intentional state, I wonder if Anthony Chaffee thinks that, okay, maybe we should just eat fruits. Because, we're doing them a favor too, right? We're helping them spread.
This is why most plants in the world are inedible. We sort of know this intuitively. If you got lost in the woods here, and you ran out of food, you wouldn't be able to eat any random plant. Most of them would make you very sick.
Yeah, so while it is true that most plants in the wild are too toxic for us to consume, the good news is we know which ones aren't. So we eat those. Amazing. It's almost as though the means by which the typical person procures plant foods is in a grocery store where edible plants are sold, as opposed to a jungle where the majority of plants are poisonous. Crazy stuff here, guys. There are also animals that are very toxic to eat, like poison dart frogs, pufferfish, blister beetles, Greenland sharks, animal products too, like bear liver. There's also the blue-ringed octopus and many more. But just like people who eat plant foods, people who eat animal foods don't consume the animal foods that are very harmful for us at very low doses. Most water is undrinkable, but this doesn't mean don't drink water. It means drink the water that is drinkable and don't drink the water that is undrinkable. I hope you guys are able to keep up with these super in-depth rebuttals.
Again, just botany, biology 101. I literally learned this in 7th grade, that plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous so less and less animals can eat them so that they can survive and thrive. And animals becoming more and more adapted to the specific poisons in specific plants so that they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. And this is where they get their dedicated food resources. This is like koalas and pandas. They eat a very specific diet. They eat other plants. They will get very sick.
Wait, so you're telling me that certain animals consume plant foods that are not poisonous to them and avoid the ones that are? That sounds very familiar. I wonder if humans do that? No, we don't do that.
The way I came to the way of eating that I do, which is really just meat and water, is 22 years ago when I was taking cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle. We went over how plants use defense chemicals in order to defend themselves, but we were looking at this from a cancer perspective, so we were looking at carcinogens. And we learned 20 years ago that Brussels sprouts alone had over 136 identified human carcinogens in them.
Alrighty guys, so Anthony's source for this claim is my cancer biology class from university 22 years ago. I'm sorry, but I'm going to need a more reliable source to support the claim that Brussels sprouts contain 136 carcinogens. It's also unclear how he's classifying carcinogens here. According to the IARC, or the International Agency for Research on Cancer, there are only 127 carcinogens categorized as group 1 carcinogens. Group 1 carcinogens are considered carcinogenic to humans. And Chaffee said Brussels sprouts alone have 136 identified human carcinogens in them. Now, clearly it can't be that all 136 of these carcinogens are considered carcinogenic to humans if we're operating under the IARC's classification system. And remember, we're being quite charitable here, because let's not forget what his source was for this claim. My cancer biology class from 22 years ago. It would be nice if he cited a paper to review, but he didn't. Lastly, if we're going to use the IARC rankings, Chaffee would have to admit that processed meat like bacon is a carcinogen. Not just a carcinogen, a group 1 carcinogen, meaning it is carcinogenic to humans. And why I'm mentioning this will be made clear in the next clip.
And that just, white cap, I'm telling you, this is why kids, no one likes Brussels sprouts, right? And that's why, right? That bad taste, that bitter taste is your brain and your tongue, which are sophisticated machines, and they can tell you, like, hey, this is bad for you, spit it out. So if and that's what we would normally naturally do as a kid. So you give an infant a piece of broccoli, they will hate you for it. You give them a piece of bacon, and their eyes light up, right? So
first of all, when I was a kid, there were many times where I would opt for broccoli over things like meat. So does that mean that broccoli is now all of a sudden healthier than meat? These are all just, anecdotes of children making decisions. We shouldn't be using what children do to determine if a food is healthy. Secondly, he's just claiming that the reason kids choose to not eat vegetables is the body knowing about these defense chemicals. Did he provide evidence for this claim? Which, by the way, is a very bold one. No, he didn't. He just made the claim. Because I didn't want to consume red meat as a kid, can I just baselessly make the claim that the reason I didn't want the red meat and wanted the broccoli instead is because my body knew that the red meat was bad for me? Of course not. And here's the irony and why I mentioned bacon earlier. He's implying that bacon must be good since the kid he spoke of would choose bacon. And he is fear-mongering over the carcinogens in Brussels sprouts when we know bacon is a group 1 carcinogen. Amazing. And to make this even more amazing, processed meat, which includes bacon, is associated with an increased risk of total cardiovascular and cancer mortality. Oh, but dude, who cares? Because, kids choose bacon over broccoli, so it must be healthier. Jokes aside, can we please not use what children want to eat to help figure out what is healthy for us? If it were solely up to me as a child, I would want to eat donuts and ice cream all day over broccoli, red meat, and other more whole foods. This is just a ridiculous point. Children's preferences can also vary based on culture, or even their parents' preferences. Now, with all this fear-mongering over cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts and cancer, let's take a look at data involving the consumption of these vegetables and health outcomes. This umbrella review on cruciferous vegetable consumption, which includes Brussels sprouts, of 41 systematic reviews and meta-analysis of 303 observational studies, found that cruciferous vegetable intake may be associated with beneficial effects on several health-related outcomes, including gastric cancer, lung cancer, endometrial cancer, and all-cause mortality. This paper, which includes a meta-analysis of 26 cohort studies, found that higher intakes of fruit and vegetables were associated with lower mortality, and this paper included subgroups of vegetables like cruciferous vegetables. But dude, the kid didn't choose the Brussels sprouts, he wanted the bacon, so never mind, screw all that data.
So we were learning that, white cap mushrooms had over 100 known carcinogens, but also spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, literally given pages and pages of every plant that you've ever come across in a grocery store. And not a single one had less than 60 known human carcinogens in them.
Yeah, so again, we're going to need a source for this claim. And we can just start with one of these grocery items. What are the 60 or more carcinogens found in a carrot? Are they group 1 carcinogens? What dosage are they present in? Do these dosages reach a carcinogenic or toxic threshold? And if not a single plant you can find in a grocery store has less than 60 known human carcinogens, and this is something we should care about, why do we see health outcomes like this?
We were quite taken aback by this, obviously. We were very, very shocked, as some of you may be right now. And I remember thinking in my head, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And our professor must have just read our minds. He looked at us like, you guys aren't getting this. And he just said, I don't eat salads. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, forget plants. And I just stopped. And you go to the grocery store and everything has plants. Right, everything's either is plants or has plants in the ingredients, and I just walked around and I just came across it's eggs and meat. I'm like, okay, well, I just eat eggs and meat. And that's what I did for a number of years and had massive health benefits. I was playing professional rugby while in university, and my athletic performance, as well as just my physical health, just increased dramatically. It was just night and day difference. And again, still feeling those positive results 22 years later.
Okay, guys. Chaffee heard his professor just say, plants are trying to kill you. I don't eat salads, and I don't feed my kids vegetables, along with this apparent info on carcinogens in plants, which again, he hasn't properly cited yet. And then boom, he decides to stop eating plants. This decision-making process gives us good insight as to what Chaffee's epistemic standards are. Truly brilliant. Screw looking at health outcomes, suggesting that specific plant foods can actually lead to good health outcomes. My professor 22 years ago just said something, plants, carcinogens, I don't feed my kids vegetables, so I guess I'm gonna stop eating vegetables. Amazing. He also just gives an anecdote about how much better everything became when he did this. We're just gonna ignore that. It's an anecdote. Plenty of vegans talk about how when they went vegan and started consuming more plant foods and more vegetables that are apparently so bad for you, they started feeling better.
So that's the thing, is that most plants will kill most animals. So it's not that some plants are poisonous, some aren't. It's that all plants are poisonous. It's just that certain animals have evolved the ability to defend themselves against specific plants. But if they eat other plants, they will get sick or even die.
What's funny about this part is, and humans aren't one of those animals, apparently. Directly from his source that he cites, quote, furthermore, humans have numerous inducible defense systems against mutagenic carcinogens, such as DNA repair, antioxidant defenses, glutathione transferases, and so forth, which may make low doses of mutagens protective in some circumstances.
And he found that people would reverse it. People today are doing this all over the world. People may know of Jordan Peterson, his daughter Michaela Peterson, who had such severe juvenile rheumatoid arthritis that she had 2 joint replacements of her ankle and I believe her hip when she was 16 years old. She eliminated she went keto first and eliminated out a lot of different toxins and nightshades in particular, and had very, very good results. Then she dropped all the salads as well, just went to pure meat and water diet. Now she's off all medications and she's having kids.
So we have another anecdote shared by Chaffee, but this time we know that this anecdote he shared is false. He claimed that Michaela Peterson has since removed all medications since going carnivore. This is not true. This was covered in depth by Vegan Gains in this video.
So you have these cyanogenic glycosides, and these exist in things like cassava root, which is a very important root, which we'll talk about. Also almonds and bitter almonds. They respond to damage. And so once you're chewing an almond or a bitter almond or cassava, that will release this cyanide. So it's normally not in the tissue, just when it's being damaged, right? So this is a defense mechanism. The cassava root, there's bitter and there's sweet. The sweet, or both of them combined, account for the third most important source of calories in the tropics, and is the primary source of calories for over 500 million people in the world. So this is a very important source of calories, and it contains cyanide. The bitter cassava will kill you.
Okay, so we don't consume bitter almonds unless they're prepared in a specific way. And we cook cassava. Boiling cassava can remove all or almost all of the cyanide in it if done with sufficient water and time. Next.
So we don't have that really as a staple here, but people do eat almonds, and people don't realize that 400 to 800 grams of almonds can be a lethal dose of cyanide in an adult. And yet we give this stuff to kids and sell it in grocery stores, which I think is wild.
So no source was provided for this claim, but let's just pretend it's true. 400 to 800 grams of almonds is around 2,300 to 4,600 calories of almonds. Who is eating this much almonds exactly? Now let's go by actual research. A lethal oral dose of cyanide is about 0.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So if somebody was 70 kilograms, that would be around 35 milligrams of cyanide. Sweet almonds have about 25.2 milligrams per kilogram of cyanide. So even 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of sweet almonds wouldn't be enough for a 70 kilogram individual to hit the lethal dose of cyanide. And for perspective, that is about 1,000 grams of almonds or 5,790 calories. The next part of his video is a lot of fear mongering over, quote, anti-nutrients in plants, which I've already covered in depth in a video dedicated to discussing anti-nutrients in plants. So we're gonna skip this section, but I'll have the video linked in the description.
The protein that's in plants is not bioavailable.
Yeah, so no source for this claim whatsoever. If protein in plants are not bioavailable, then why do we see, when protein is matched between omnivorous and plant-based diets, no difference in muscle strength and mass accrual? Surely if plant protein is not bioavailable, we wouldn't see results like this. And since Chaffee likes anecdotes, what about me? If the plant protein I'm consuming is not bioavailable, why do I get results like this? Why was I able to lose all of my muscle gain from resistance training due to a Crohn's disease flare, and then gain it all back by only consuming non-bioavailable protein sources for protein? I'd love to hear an answer. And anecdotes aside, if plant protein is not bioavailable, why does this meta-analysis show no difference in soy versus animal protein on gains in muscle mass and strength in response to resistance training?
Like if you think about wheat, for example, 80% of the protein in wheat is gluten, and that is completely unavailable to us to be used as protein.
Source for this claim? None? Okay. And here's a source suggesting that wheat gluten is incredibly digestible for humans. Wow, look at that. Sources for claims. Amazing stuff, guys. And here's a clip of one of the most outrageous things I've ever heard Chaffee say.
And so you can get quite a lot of weight gain from eating lectins, especially when you have leaky gut and it gets into your system. And eliminating these sorts of things from your system, all of a sudden people lose a lot of weight. I certainly noticed that. I was just eating vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, and just meat. And just by dropping the spinach, kale, and broccoli, I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. And so, it was just came right off me. And I was eating more calories. I was eating much more meat. I started eating a lot more meat, a lot more fatty meat. So I probably quintupled my calories, but I lost 10 kilos. Okay.
This man claims to have simply dropped spinach, kale, and broccoli from his diet, but then probably quintupled his calories and then lost 10 kilograms or 22 pounds. Just what? How many calories was he eating prior? For somebody his size, let's just assume that it was 2,500 calories. This would mean he went from 2,500 calories to 12,500 calories and lost 22 pounds? Let's even be hyper charitable and say he was eating 1,000 calories per day, which I don't know how he would be doing that as someone his size, but let's just pretend. This would mean he went from 1,000 calories per day to 5,000 calories per day and lost 22 pounds. And by the way, he said this all happened within 10 days, which makes this story all the more improbable.
I lost 10 kilos in 10 days.
Truly unbelievable. Some of the carnivores watching may be coping and saying, oh, well, there's all those carbs in broccoli, kale, and spinach that he dropped. That's why he lost all that water weight. All that weight he lost in 10 days, or most of it, was water. Do I even need to spell out how low in carbohydrates broccoli, kale, and spinach are? This anecdote is just ridiculous, and in all honesty suggests we shouldn't take anything he says seriously about what he experienced on his diet. Anecdotes are already considered unreliable, but I have never heard that somebody had quintupled their calories and lost 22 pounds. Unreal. Let's now move on to a video titled Challenging Dr. Chaffee's Carnivore Diet, The Tough Questions, which by the way, contains 0 sources in the description. I actually recently covered in a clip where Chaffee says that a vegan diet is deficient. So we'll put that up first and then we'll get into the other claims that I didn't cover in that short.
But, then B12 does not exist. Even the Seventh-day Adventists who are religiously anti-meat, they say on how to be vegan and vegetarian, hey, B12, you can't get this. They even say you have to supplement. It's something you have to supplement. If you have to supplement, then by definition, your diet is deficient.
So I've been vegan for around 8 years or so, and I've heard from meat eaters and carnivores like this many times that because a vegan diet requires a form of supplementation, like a B12 supplement, it is by definition deficient. This is always so confusing to me because you're saying that a vegan diet requires a supplement, and therefore if a vegan diet that is deficient also comes with a supplement, it's no longer deficient. So if somebody decides to consume this deficient vegan diet and takes a supplement, what exactly is the problem? I mean, just look at my B12 levels as a vegan. As you can see, not deficient. And here's a paper showing the health outcomes of people in regard to B12 when they're vegan and take a B12 supplement. It works. When you say that a vegan diet is deficient because it requires a supplement, you're admitting that with a supplement, it isn't deficient.
My friend, Professor Bill Schindler, who is a professor of anthropology or paleoanthropology and archaeology at the University of Maryland, just retired. He was just over in Sardinia, which is, Mediterranean, and it's the epicenter where he was at, the epicenter of the original blue zone identified of people who were living, very great age and very good health, well over 100. There were a lot of people living over 100. They were completely independent. They weren't in nursing homes, just, crumbling to dust. They were out there being active adults. And this was famously put in the blue zones as largely plant-based, which is a flat out lie. He said that not only are they meat-based, they're nearly carnivore and they're whole animal-based.
So Chaffee claims that the people of Sardinia are mostly carnivore, and his evidence for this claim is, quote, my friend was in Sardinia and said that he saw them consume a meat-based diet and be nearly carnivore. A very high standard of evidence, I know. Definitely a higher standard than this paper on dietary patterns in the Sardinian population showing that they don't actually eat meat daily. Imagine consuming a mostly carnivore diet that is apparently meat-based, but not consuming meat every day. Makes sense.
There is no retinol. There is no vitamin A in plants or fungus, right? It comes in the form of beta carotene, it's carotenoids, right? So say, oh, well, you can turn those into retinol. Well, some people can. About 45% of people do not have the ability to turn beta carotene into vitamin A.
As usual, no source was provided for this claim. Amazing. Sweet potatoes have about a 13-to-1 beta carotene to retinol conversion ratio. Some people have a 55 to 70% impairment for this kind of conversion, except for very rare cases where it's more. This is where a supplement may be warranted. So with no impairment in conversion, 1 cup of sweet potatoes can result in enough retinol to meet the RDA of 900 micrograms per men. In someone with 60% impairment, 2 cups is enough. And of course, Chaffee provides no evidence of vegans having higher vitamin A deficiency rates than non-vegans. Amazing. And here is health outcome data showing that vegans do not have lower vitamin A status.
In fact, there's an inverse relationship with the amount of saturated fat we were eating from the beginning of the 1900s and the rise in heart disease. Inversely related. In the 1800s, we kept very good records going back hundreds of years. And in the early 1800s, we were eating, far more meat than we were for the next 200 years until, much more recently. And most of that was beef and things like that. And there was no heart disease throughout the entire 1800s.
No heart disease throughout the 1800s? What a bold claim. Did he provide evidence for this? No. We've seen atherosclerosis in 16th century Greenland Inuit mummies and Lithuanian mummies from the 18th and 19th century, and Egyptian mummies spanning from 4,000 to nearly 2,000 years ago. Why would Chaffee make such an easily refutable claim? I don't know.
The other thing on the studies, the other carnivore epiphany I guess I've had lately, you kind of touched on this, but and from reading this book more, is that, is there any industry in the world right now that's worth more money or revenue than sugar? Because like, if you look it up, if you Google what's the biggest industry, it's usually like tech is the biggest industry, but everybody has to eat. And if you look at sugar, like you were saying, you have Coca-Cola, Nestle, all the cereal companies, you go to the grocery store, sugar is in everything. And so is it so crazy that every economic driver is pushing us towards eating sugar more? And every study you see, this was something I was thinking about last week. It was like, hey, if you really want to sell more sugar, the best way to do it isn't even to promote or advertise sugar, even though they do that and there's cereal commercials for kids and you get them hooked young and all of that. But it's just simple. It's just demonize meat. If you demonize meat and you make meat evil and it's going to kill you, what's going to happen? You're not going to eat meat. The only thing that's left to eat, everyone does it. You end up going to the grocery store. You end up eating a bunch of carb, junk, processed food with sugar in it. You're going to sell so much more sugar if you have all these studies telling us meat's going to kill you. Meat's going to clog your arteries. And
yeah. Well, the sugar companies make around $1.3 trillion a year. So this is not small business. Right.
And then all the companies that have sugar in their products, they're like subsidiaries
even
of
more
the sugar companies.
Yeah, exactly.
So the basic idea Chaffee is trying to paint here is that the sugar industry is worth a lot. In the year 2021, the worldwide sugar industry market value was $68 billion US, and is projected to be $77 billion by 2027. Now, this may sound like a lot in isolation, but wait. In 2022, soy's market value was $51.4 billion. In 2023, meat alternatives market was $7.4 billion. In 2022, wheat's market value was $331 billion. So what about beef? Global beef, and not even including other meats, is $159 billion and projected to be $224 billion by 2030. For all meat, it's $2.3 trillion. In 2023, global dairy was over $1 trillion. So compared to the sugar industry, beef and dairy alone win. And of course, all meat combined is ridiculously high compared to the sugar industry at $2.3 trillion. But hey, let's just talk about the market value of sugar being so high and ignore the market value for animal products, which is significantly higher. Amazing.
You can't eat something for 2 million years, survive as a species, and thrive as a species if you are not already biologically evolved to it and designed to eat it, or you have then become optimized to it. It just doesn't work like that. That's just not how biology works. And so I've heard this argument from Simon Hill, which I just thought was insane. He's like, oh yeah, well, I'm not arguing that, people, have been eating meat for 2 million years, but, it's probably not optimal, probably suboptimal. This thing that we've never eaten before in human history, that's definitely better because, some study said so. Like, I just don't care. You don't understand biology from a fundamental level.
So we have Chaffee literally saying he doesn't care what studies show that a particular food is healthy or even a particular food is unhealthy. Because of evolution though, we've adapted to eat meat though, and meat is healthy though because of these things. Now, I'm not going to be spending too much time on this point because there is a debate coming out soon where Anthony Chaffee is sufficiently pressed on this point, which is fundamentally based in him thinking being biologically adapted to consume a certain food necessarily means that consuming it is beneficial for living into old age. When in reality, biological adaptation is more beneficial for getting us to reproductive age, not necessarily living well off into old age. This debate may or may not be uploaded at the time at which I've uploaded this video. If the debate has been made public by the time I upload this video, I'll have it linked in the pinned comment. But yeah, I mean, let's just be clear. The man literally said, "I don't care," in response to rigorous papers that contain results directly conflicting with his worldview about red meat and long-term health. Amazing. Just who cares about studies and data? Evolution though. All right, guys. Well, that's the end of this video. There are so many things said by Anthony that I did not cover in this video, and there's certainly room for a part 2, maybe even a part 3, or even a part 4, just for responding to Anthony Chaffee. He says a lot of questionable things. If a part 2, 3, or 4 is something you guys would want to see, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to help make videos like this more possible and help me, put videos like this together, which, take a lot of time and are very in-depth, please consider supporting on Patreon. You can get early access to content and one-on-one messaging through Patreon. If you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you can hear online. If you want to get that as well, that'll be linked in the pinned comment. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude,
fuck off. I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,